The teacher of spirituality. Every soul is destined to be perfect, and every being in the end will attain to that state. Whatever we are now is the result of whatever we have been or thought in the past, and whatever we shall be in the future will be the result of what we do or think now. But this does not preclude our receiving help from outside. The possibilities of the soul are always quickened by some help from outside, so much so that in the vast majority of cases in the world, help from outside is almost absolutely necessary. Quickening influence comes from outside, and that works upon our own potentialities. And then the growth begins. Spiritual life comes, and man becomes holy and perfect in the end. This quickening impulse which comes from outside cannot be received from books. The soul can receive impulse only from another soul and from nothing else. We may study books all our lives, we may become very intellectual, but in the end, we find we have not developed at all spiritually. It does not follow that a higher order of intellectual development always shows an equivalent development of the spiritual side of man. On the other hand, we find cases almost every day where the intellect has become very highly developed at the expense of the spirit. Now, in intellectual development, we can get much help from books, but in spiritual development, almost nothing. In studying books, sometimes we are deluded into thinking that we are being spiritually helped, but if we analyze ourselves, we shall find that only our intellect has been helped and not the spirit. That is the reason why almost every one of us can speak most wonderfully on spiritual subjects, but when the time of action comes, we find ourselves so woefully deficient. It is because books cannot give us that impulse from outside. To quicken the spirit, that impulse must come from another soul. That soul from which this impulse comes is called the Guru, the teacher, and the soul to which the impulse is conveyed is called the disciple, the student. In order to convey this impulse, in the first place, the soul from which it comes must possess the power of transmitting it, as it were, to another. And in the second place, the object to which it is transmitted must be fit to receive it. The seed must be a living seed, and the field must be ready plowed. And when both these conditions are fulfilled, a wonderful growth of religion takes place. The speaker of religion must be wonderful, so must the hearer be. And when both of these are really wonderful, extraordinary, then alone will splendid spiritual growth come, and not otherwise. These are the real teachers, and these are the real students. Besides these, the others are playing with spirituality, just having a little intellectual struggle, just satisfying a little curiosity, but are standing only on the outward fringe of the horizon of religion. There is some value in that. Real thirst for religion may thus be awakened. All comes in course of time. It is a mysterious law of nature that as soon as the field is ready, the seed must come. As soon as the soul wants religion, the transmitter of religious force must come. The seeking sinner meeteth the seeking Saviour. When the power that attracts in the receiving soul is full and ripe, the power which answers to that attraction must come. But there are great dangers in the way. There is the danger to the receiving soul of mistaking its momentary emotion for real religious yearning. We find that in ourselves. Many times in our lives, somebody dies whom we loved. We receive a blow. For a moment, we think that this world is slipping between our fingers and that we want something higher and that we are going to be religious. In a few days, that wave passes away and we are left stranded where we were. We oft times mistake such impulses for real thirst after religion, but so long as these momentary emotions are thus mistaken, that continuous real want of the soul will not come, and we shall not find the transmitter. So when we complain that we have not got the truth and that we want it so much, instead of complaining, our first duty ought to be to look into our own souls and find whether we really want it. In the vast majority of cases, we shall find that we are not fit, we do not want. There was no thirst after the spiritual. There are still more difficulties for the transmitter. There are many who, though immersed in ignorance, yet in the pride of their hearts, think they know everything, and not only do not stop there, but offer to take others on their shoulders, and thus, the blind leading the blind, they both fall into the ditch. The world is full of these. Everyone wants to be a teacher. Every beggar wants to make a gift of $1 million. Just as the latter is ridiculous, so are these teachers. How are we to know a teacher then? In the first place, the sun requires no torch to make it visible. We do not light a candle to see the sun. When the sun rises, we instinctively become aware of its rising, and when a teacher of men comes to help us, the soul will instinctively know that it has found the truth. Truth stands on its own evidences. It does not require any other testimony to attest it. It is self effulgent. It penetrates into the inmost recesses of our nature, and the whole universe stands up and says, "This is truth." These are the very great teachers, but we can get help from the lesser ones also. And as we ourselves are not always sufficiently intuitive to be certain of our judgment of the man from whom we receive, there ought to be certain tests. There are certain conditions necessary in the taught and also in the teacher. The conditions necessary in the taught are purity, a real thirst after knowledge, and perseverance. No impure soul can be religious. That is the one great condition. Purity in every way is absolutely necessary. The other condition is a real thirst after knowledge. Who wants? That is the question. We get whatever we want. That is an old law. He who wants gets. To want religion is a very difficult thing, not so easy as we generally think. Then we always forget that religion does not consist in hearing talks or in reading books, but it is a continuous struggle, a grappling with our own nature, a continuous fight till the victory is achieved. It is not a question of 1 or 2 days, of years, or of lives, but it may be hundreds of lifetimes, and we must be ready for that. It may come immediately, or it may not come in hundreds of lifetimes, and we must be ready for that. The student who sets out with such a spirit finds success. In the teacher, we must first see that he knows the secret of the scriptures. The whole world reads scriptures, Bibles, Vedas, Qurans, and others. But they are only words, external arrangement, syntax, the etymology, the philology, the dry bones of religion. The teacher may be able to find what is the age of any book, but words are only the external forms in which things come. Those who deal too much in words and let the mind run always in the force of words lose the spirit. So the teacher must be able to know the spirit of the scriptures. The network of words is like a huge forest in which the human mind loses itself and finds no way out. The various methods of joining words, the various methods of speaking a beautiful language, the various methods of explaining the dicta of the scriptures are only for the enjoyment of the learned. They do not attain perfection. They are simply desirous to show their learning, so that the world may praise them and see that they are learned men. You will find that no one of the great teachers of the world went into these various explanations of texts. On their part, there is no attempt at text torturing, no saying, this word means this, and this is the philological connection between this and that word. You study all the great teachers the world has produced, and you will see that no one of them goes that way. Yet they taught, while others who have nothing to teach will take up a word and write a 3-volume book on its origin and use. As my master used to say, what would you think of men who went into a mango orchard and busied themselves in counting the leaves and examining the color of the leaves, the size of the twigs, the number of branches, and so forth, while only one of them had the sense to begin to eat the mangoes? So leave this counting of leaves and twigs and this note taking to others. That work has its own value in its proper place, but not here in the spiritual realm. Men never become spiritual through such work. You have never once seen a strong spiritual man among these leaf counters. Religion is the highest aim of man, the highest glory, but it does not require leaf counting. If you want to be a Christian, it is not necessary to know whether Christ was born in Jerusalem or Bethlehem, or just the exact date on which he pronounced the Sermon on the Mount. You only require to feel the Sermon on the Mount. It is not necessary to read 2,000 words on when it was delivered. All that is for the enjoyment of the learned. Let them have it. Say amen to that. Let us eat the mangoes. The second condition necessary in the teacher is that he must be sinless. The question was once asked to me in England by a friend: why should we look to the personality of a teacher? We have only to judge of what he says and take that up. Not so. If a man wants to teach me something of dynamics or chemistry or any other physical science, he may be of any character. He can still teach dynamics or any other science. For the knowledge that the physical sciences require is simply intellectual and depends on the intellectual strength. A man can have in such a case a gigantic intellectual power without the least development of his soul. But in the spiritual sciences, it is impossible from first to last that there can be any spiritual light in that soul which is impure. What can such a soul teach? It knows nothing. Spiritual truth is purity. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. In that one sentence is the gist of all religions. If you have learnt that, all that has been said in the past and all that it is possible to say in the future, you have known. You need not look into anything else, for you have all that is necessary in that one sentence. It could save the world were all the other scriptures lost. A vision of God, a glimpse of the beyond, never comes until the soul is pure. Therefore, in the teacher of spirituality, purity is the one thing indispensable. We must see first what he is, and then what he says. Not so with intellectual teachers. There we care more for what he says than what he is. With the teacher of religion, we must first and foremost see what he is, and then alone comes the value of the words, because he is the transmitter. What will he transmit if he has not that spiritual power in him? To give a simile, if a heater is hot, it can convey heat vibrations, but if not, it is impossible to do so. Even so is the case with the mental vibrations of the religious teacher, which he conveys to the mind of the taught. It is a question of transference, and not of stimulating only our intellectual faculties. Some power, real and tangible, goes out from the teacher and begins to grow in the mind of the taught. Therefore, the necessary condition is that the teacher must be true. The third condition is motive. We should see that he does not teach with any ulterior motive, for name or fame or anything else, but simply for love, pure love for you. When spiritual forces are transmitted from the teacher to the taught, they can only be conveyed through the medium of love. There is no other medium that can convey them. Any other motive, such as gain or name, would immediately destroy the conveying medium. Therefore, all must be done through love. One who has known God can alone be a teacher. When you see that in the teacher these conditions are fulfilled, you are safe. If they are not fulfilled, it is unwise to accept him. There is a great risk, if he cannot convey goodness, of his conveying wickedness sometimes. This must be guarded against. Therefore, it naturally follows that we cannot be taught by anybody and everybody. The preaching of sermons by brooks and stones may be true as a poetical figure, but no one can preach a single grain of truth until he has it in himself. To whom do the brooks preach sermons? To that human soul only whose lotus of life has already opened. When the heart has been opened, it can receive teaching from the brooks or the stones. It can get some religious teaching from all these, but the unopened heart will see nothing but brooks and rolling stones. A blind man may come to a museum, but he comes and goes only. If he is to see, his eyes must first be opened. This eye-opener of religion is the teacher. With the teacher, therefore, our relationship is that of ancestor and descendant. The teacher is the spiritual ancestor, and the disciple is the spiritual descendant. It is all very well to talk of liberty and independence, but without humility, submission, veneration, and faith, there will not be any religion. It is a significant fact that where this relation still exists between the teacher and the taught, there alone gigantic spiritual souls grow. But in those who have thrown it off, religion is made into a diversion. In nations and churches where this relation between teacher and taught is not maintained spiritually is almost an unknown quantity. It never comes without that feeling. There is no one to transmit and no one to be transmitted to, because they are all independent. Of whom can they learn? And if they come to learn, they come to buy learning. Give me $1 worth of religion. Cannot I pay $1 for it? Religion cannot be got that way. There is nothing higher and holier than the knowledge which comes to the soul transmitted by a spiritual teacher. If a man has become a perfect yogi, it comes by itself, but it cannot be got in books. You may go and knock your head against the four corners of the world, seek in the Himalayas, the Alps, the Caucasus, the desert of Gobi or Sahara, or the bottom of the sea, but it will not come until you find a teacher. Find the teacher, serve him as a child, open your heart to his influence, see in him God manifested. Our attention should be fixed on the teacher as the highest manifestation of God, and as the power of attention concentrates there, the picture of the teacher as man will melt away, the frame will vanish, and the real God will be left there. Those that come to truth with such a spirit of veneration and love, for them the Lord of truth speaks the most wonderful words. Take thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Wherever his name is spoken, that place is holy. How much more so is a man who speaks his name? And with what veneration ought we to approach a man out of whom come spiritual truths? This is the spirit in which we are to be taught. Such teachers are few in number, no doubt, in this world, but the world is never altogether without them. The moment it is absolutely bereft of these, it will cease to be. It will become a hideous hell and will just drop. These teachers are the fair flowers of human life and keep the world going. It is the strength that is manifested from these hearts of life that keeps the bounds of society intact. Beyond these is another set of teachers, the Christs of the world. These teachers of all teachers represent God Himself in the form of man. They are much higher. They can transmit spirituality with a touch, with a wish, which makes even the lowest and most degraded characters saints in 1 second. Do you not read of how they used to do these things? They are not the teachers about whom I was speaking. They are the teachers of all teachers, the greatest manifestations of God to man. We cannot see God except through them. We cannot help worshipping them, and they are the only beings we are bound to worship. No man hath seen God but as he is manifested in the Son. We cannot see God. If we try to see him, we make a hideous caricature of God. There is an Indian story that an ignorant man was asked to make an image of the god Shiva, and after days of struggle, he made an image of a monkey. So, whenever we attempt to make an image of God, we make a caricature of him, because we cannot understand him as anything higher than man, so long as we are men. The time will come when we transcend our human nature and know him as he is, but so long as we are men, we must worship him in man. Talk as we may, try as we cannot see God except as a man. We may deliver great intellectual speeches, become very great rationalists, and prove that these tales of God as all nonsense. But let us come to practical common sense. What is behind this remarkable intellect? Zero, nothing, simply so much froth. When next you hear a man delivering great intellectual lectures against this worship of God, get hold of him and ask him what is his idea of God, what he means by omnipotence and omniscience and omnipresent love, and so forth, beyond the spelling of the words. He means nothing. He cannot formulate an idea. He is no better than the man in the street who has not read a single book. That man in the street, however, is quiet and does not disturb the world, while the other man's arguments cause disturbance. He has no actual perception, and both are on the same plane. Religion is realization, and you must make the sharpest distinction between talk and realization. What you perceive in your soul is realization. Man has no idea of the spirit. He has to think of it with the forms he has before him. He has to think of the blue skies, or the expansive fields, or the sea, or something huge. How else can you think of God? So, what are you doing in reality? You are talking of omnipresence and thinking of the sea. Is God the sea? A little more common sense is required. Nothing is so uncommon as common sense. The world is too full of talk. A truce to all this frothy argument of the world. We are by our present constitution limited and bound to see God as man. If the buffaloes want to worship God, they will see him as a huge buffalo. If a fish wants to worship God, it will have to think of Him as a big fish. You and I, the buffalo, the fish, each represents so many different vessels. All these go to the sea to be filled with water according to the shape of each vessel. In each of these vessels is nothing but water. So with God. When men see Him, they see Him as man, and the animals as animal, each according to his ideal. That is the only way you can see Him. You have to worship Him as man, because there is no other way out of it. Two classes of men do not worship God as man: the human brute who has no religion, and the Paramahamsa, highest yogi, who has gone beyond humanity, who has thrown off his mind and body and gone beyond the limits of nature. All nature has become his self. He has neither mind nor body, and can worship God, as can a Jesus or a Buddha. They did not worship God as man. The other extreme is the human brute. You know how two extremes look alike. Similar is the case with the extreme of ignorance and the other extreme of knowledge. Neither of these worships anybody. The extremely ignorant do not worship God, not being developed enough to feel the need for so doing. Those that have attained the highest knowledge also do not worship God, having realized and become one with God. God never worships God. But these two poles of existence, if anyone tells you he is not going to worship God as man, take care of him. He is an irresponsible talker. He is mistaken. His religion is for frothy thinkers. It is intellectual nonsense. Therefore, it is absolutely necessary to worship God as man, and blessed are those races which have such a God man to worship. Christians have such a God man in Christ. Therefore, cling close to Christ. Never give up Christ. That is the natural way to see God. See God in man. All our ideas of God are concentrated there. The great limitation Christians have is that they do not heed other manifestations of God besides Christ. He was a manifestation of God. So was Buddha. So were some others. And there will be hundreds of others. Do not limit God anywhere. Pay all the reverence that you think is due to God, to Christ. That is the only worship we can have. God cannot be worshipped. He is the immanent being of the universe. It is only to His manifestation as man that we can pray. It would be a very good plan, when Christians pray, to say, "In the name of Christ." It would be wise to stop praying to God and only pray to Christ. God understands human failings and becomes a man to do good to humanity. Whenever virtue subsides and immorality prevails, then I come to help mankind, says Krishna. He also says, "Fools, not knowing that I, the omnipotent and omnipresent God of the universe, have taken this human form, deride me and think that cannot be." Their minds have been clouded with demoniacal ignorance, so they cannot see in Him the Lord of the universe. These great incarnations of God are to be worshipped. Not only so, they alone can be worshipped. And on the days of their birth, and on the days when they went out of this world, we ought to pay more particular reverence to them. In worshipping Christ, I would rather worship Him just as He desires. On the day of His birth, I would rather worship Him by fasting than by feasting, by praying. When these are thought of, these great ones, they manifest themselves in our souls, and they make us like unto them. Our whole nature changes, and we become like them. But you must not mix up Christ or Buddha with hobgoblins flying through the air and all that sort of nonsense. Sacrilege! Christ coming into a spiritualistic seance to dance! I have seen that presence in this country. It is not in that way that these manifestations of God come. The very touch of one of them will be manifest upon a man. When Christ touches, the whole soul of man will change. That man will be transfigured just as he was. His whole life will be spiritualized. From every pore of his body, spiritual power will emanate. What were the great powers of Christ in miracles and healing? In one of his character. They were low, vulgar things that he could not help doing because he was among vulgar beings. Where was this miracle making done? Among the Jews. And the Jews did not take him. Where was it not done? In Europe. The miracle making went to the Jews who rejected Christ, and the Sermon on the Mount to Europe, which accepted him. The human spirit took on what was true and rejected what was spurious. The great strength of Christ is not in his miracles or his healing. Any fool could do those things. Fools can heal others, devils can heal others. I have seen horrible demoniacal men do wonderful miracles. They seem to manufacture fruits out of the earth. I have known fools and diabolical men tell the past, present, and future. I have seen fools heal at a glance, by the will, the most horrible diseases. These are powers, truly, but often demoniacal powers. The other is the spiritual power of Christ, which will live and always has lived, an almighty, gigantic love, and the words of truth which he preached. The action of healing men at a glance is forgotten, but his saying, "Blessed are the pure in heart," that lives today. These words are a gigantic magazine of power, inexhaustible. So long as the human mind lasts, so long as the name of God is not forgotten, these words will roll on and never cease to be. These are the powers Jesus taught and the powers he had. The power of purity. It is a definite power. So, when worshipping Christ, in praying to him, we must always remember what we are seeking. Not those foolish things of miraculous display, but the wonderful powers of the Spirit, which make man free, give him control over the whole of nature, take from him the badge of slavery, and show God unto him.